Today we're going to start the compatibility course. And compatibility is one of the biggest subjects you can deal with when it comes to looking at anything with cards or with astrology or anything. It's just a huge area of study. The reason for that is because so many different parts of a person go into making them compatible with another person or incompatible. So this is going to be a quite lengthy course, okay? And you're going to learn a lot of things. In fact, a lot of things you learn will just help you understand relationships in a way that just lets you have better relationships even without seeing the compatibility. Okay, so compatibility. By itself, compatibility with cards is pretty simple. There's so many things you can do with compatibility. But with the cards, the things that you can do are largely you can find connections between people. Will they connect? What things are connecting between the people? It's the connections that people have between them that ultimately are going to keep them together and make them share something in life together. So the compatibility of the cards is a very kind of a concrete compatibility of, can these two people concretely fit together? Do they have things that fit in each other's lives? Okay? However, fitting and happiness are two completely different things. With the cards, we can look at the people's two spreads. We can see how the spreads come together and get a really good idea of how they're going to fit together. But we don't want to jump to conclusions and say, oh, you're fitting together, you're going to be happy, because that might not be the truth. But the compatibility itself, how they're seeing the card connections, how they'll fit, is going to be actually the easy and short part of this course. Okay? Now that part, we have general compatibility or general connections. So if you get a person who's a 7 of diamonds and you get a person who's a 10 of spades, let's say, both those people, every 7 of diamonds on earth is going to connect in certain ways in a similar way as every 10 of spades. Those are going to be the general connections that are there between every 7 of diamonds and every 10 of spades. Then there's also the specific connections. And the specific connections get a little more interesting and take a little more work to look at. And that is how this particular 7 of diamonds compares to this particular 10 of spades, considering that these two people have planets in certain cards and therefore have completely different 7 of diamond spades and they're completely different 10 of spades. Okay? But you get a general idea of how a person connects just by knowing their card. And if that general idea is good, then you can go on to seeing the specific connections. The specific connections are more important, but if the connections, the general connections are weak or not really good, it's going to take a lot out of a relationship that's probably not going to be worth keeping. So you want to look at both general and specific connections. And we're going to cover all those things in many various ways. There's even a lot of ways that can be done. Okay? But we're going to actually do that last. Before that, we're going to do what's called the Pre Compatibility. The Pre Compatibility shows 80-90% of whether people are going to be happy with each other. Okay? They have to fit, yes, in order to have the relationship. We'll do that with compatibility, the connections. But then are they going to be happy with each other? Most of that is looking at the people's charts, the pre-compatibility, where you're just looking at one chart as a person to see, okay, are these people going to be happy? And is there any type of people they would be more happy with or less happy with? Okay, that's step number one. Not skipping that step and just jumping to compatibility will cause all kinds of problems. And a lot of card readers will do that. They'll say, oh, you're this card and he's that card, oh, you'll have a great match. It's like, not necessarily, you know. If either of those people have had a history of relationships that went south, that didn't work out, that were really painful and disappointing, probably they've got some serious issues in their pre-compatibility that can possibly make them incompatible with everyone. Because, like I always like to say, nobody's compatible with an asshole. Okay? If somebody's an intolerable, super difficult person, no one's going to be compatible with that person. It doesn't matter how many connections they have, they won't have happiness with that person, and the person they're with won't be happy with them. Okay? So when it comes to compatibility, the key thing to understand is that the compatibility is not all that important. What's most important is the person's pre-compatibility, or basically capacity to have a relationship with the understanding of what they need more or less of to make them have the best relationship possible. Persons who have that, it's pretty easy to find a compatible person. The way everything moves, there's tons of people we can make connections with. Hundreds, thousands, There's a huge part of the population we can find some reason to connect to. So there's not a magical person that's going to make you happy all of a sudden, that's going to change your reality. You might find some connections with people that make you focus on some different parts with yourself, but those other parts, those other dark parts will eventually always catch up to you. And so the bottom line is, the most important thing when it comes to the happiness of a person or of two people has to do with each person's individual chart, which we're going to examine in what I call the pre-compatibility. Okay? There's a lot of aspects to that. I'm going to talk about those shortly. Then the third thing we have to look at is simply fate. People can have connections. People can be healthy adults and therefore capable of having a decent relationship if they have decent pre-compatibility. But then fate still might be against them. A person may be fated to never have a relationship. A person may be fated to have a relationship that ends for one reason or the other. Okay? Even people with strong connections, sometimes the relationship might end due to fate. The time may come for them to go in different directions. That'll be shown in a year where their connections utterly fail and it's time to go in their own directions. Or people may be destined not to get married. Or people may be destined to spend significant time with 3 different spouses, and so they end up having 3 marriages. People may be destined to have a stable one long relationship that sucks, and another person might be destined to have 2 good relationships, but that are very different because of shifts and changes that happen in their lives. And other people may be destined to have lots of up and down relationships. So in the bottom line, you have the fate underlying the people we meet, the things that come into our life, and the things that leave. And compatibility is not going to make up for that fate. What compatibility does, and the most important thing really about compatibility, is it helps us understand the person that we're with and understand our relationship so we can learn better from it, enjoy it better, and make the most progress with it. Because while we choose to be in relationships because we want to have a good time and we want to have happiness and we want to feel good and we want to have a good life, relationships, we're in them to a large degree to work certain things out with ourselves. And understanding the compatibilities, understanding the people we're with, understanding our pre-compatibility and all these things can help us get through that with a lot less pain. So a lot of when it comes to compatibility, it's not often where we say, oh, you're compatible, marry them, oh, you're not compatible, run. More often than not, compatibility is really a counseling art of talking to the people, helping them work through their things that they're fated to work through. Now, some cultures, like India, they get into arranged marriages. And they will look at lots of people, and they'll look at horoscopes, and they'll say, oh, am I compatible with this person? And if they're not compatible, astrologically, they won't even contact that person to consider them anymore. They're just like, okay, check that one off the list. So there is those types of things where people sometimes in a really detached way, I'm just checking if this person is worth further inquiry type thing. At that point, yeah, then it's your job to say, this would be harder than it should be, and I wouldn't call this compatible. Or this could be for make a good, healthy relationship. I would say go for this one. And sometimes people who are maybe doing dating sites and in the West are meeting lots of people and just want to see, okay, is it worth pursuing this person? At that point, you're in a yes-no compatibility. But more often than not, people come because they're in love with someone, and more often than not, the person they're in love with, they're having some difficulties or doubts with, or they've had some frustrations, or they've had a breakup, and they really, really miss the person, and they can't wait for them to come back, and they don't know what to do. So at that point, the person is connected to that person. They have a connection. So you obviously want to find that connection and see what it is, see what that connection is and what they're working out. A bad connection, a painful connection, can hold people together as firmly as a really enjoyable connection. It just depends if the person's fate is to suffer that pain or enjoy some good stuff. Now, if the connection's a negative, painful connection, of course you'd want to explain it to the person and advise them to get away from it as soon as they can. Well, why prolong it, right? Okay, hopefully you can get through this soon and learn what you need to and move on. If it's a good connection, then of course, if they're having problems, the problem is going to be due to their pre-compatibility. And you want to counsel them with that, help them understand how they can make it better, hopefully keep that good connection alive as long as possible, and if they really work on their issues throughout their life. So either way, it's this whole counseling thing that comes into play. It's not just they're compatible, they're not compatible, stay or go. It's they're connected to the person. They've got an emotional connection, a karmic connection. They have something to work out with that person. And at that point, it's your job to understand it, see what it is, help the person understand it so they can get to the best parts of that connection that are there. And if there's some difficult parts of the connection, work past those and get away from those as soon as possible. Okay? And that's most of the connections you'll be doing as a card reader. As a Vedic astrologer, I also teach Vedic astrology. Most compatibilities are coming from people who are getting arranged marriages, and it's just this quick yes, no. Really, it's really quite easy to do. See if you feel fatal, flaws in it, you just say no, end of story. But with the cards, you'll be attracting people who are more Westerners that are involved in partnerships. And so a compatibility reading becomes this huge thing where you have to have a lot of knowledge about relationships, about women, about men, and about the cards and how all that comes together. And most of that we're going to teach in the pre-compatibility. So that's going to be the really long part of the course. And that's what we're going to start with, okay? Because there's no point in looking at two people's birth spreads together until you've looked at each person individually, okay? So in pre-compatibility, the most important thing is the masculine and feminine energies of a person. When we're dealing with a relationship, we're dealing with the flow of a man with a woman. Two people of different natures working in a synergistic, hopefully better way. And that means there's a flow of masculine and feminine energies. So the bottom line between a person's ability to have a good relationship is how good their masculine and feminine energies are. If a person has weaknesses in their masculine and feminine energies, they won't be able to relate to another person using that masculine or feminine energy. So if a man has masculine issues, he won't be able to relate to a woman as a healthy male. If a man has damaged feminine issues, he's not going to be able to relate to a woman in a healthy way either. Okay, same goes for a woman. If a woman has damaged feminine issues, she's not going to be able to relate to a man as a woman, as a healthy, mature woman. If a woman has a damaged, male indicators in her spread, or a damaged masculine side, she's not going to be able to relate to a man in a way that is healthy and works. So we have to look at these two things, study their masculine and feminine energies, and see where they're working and see where they're not working. That right there is going to be the most single important thing you do when you look at a chart for pre-compatibility. If these things are off, the person's going to be very stunted in their ability to have a relationship, and they'll have a history of problematical relationships unless they're very young and haven't had a relationship yet. Okay? So that'll be really, really important. The most important thing for examining this are the sun, who's the masculine planet and the sun card, and the moon, who's the female planet and the moon card. Okay? After that, people have passion. A lot of reason people want to get married is they want an outlet for their passion, a concrete outlet for their passion that's boiling inside of them. Different people have different levels of passion. If one person's super passionate and another person's not very passionate, the super passionate person's eventually going to not find an outlet with that person and have to find that outlet in other places. Does that mean the other person will burn all that passion by cheating and having affairs? No, not necessarily. They might do it by doing other things. Maybe they'll become an extreme skier and spend a lot of time doing other extreme things. But it'll still take them away from sharing passion with the person they're with. In a healthy relationship, there's a healthy degree of passion being shared. Okay? So, are they of equally passionate natures? So we have to judge, okay, is this person got really strong passion, healthy strong passion, weak passion, excessive, uncontrollable passion? What kind of passion do they have? And what kind of passion does this person have? And can those two passions work together? And they need to be so that the people can, work together with their passion, but also so that they understand each other. People who have different degrees of passion oftentimes don't understand the other person because they don't understand how anyone could not be a passionate person or as passionate, or why are you so crazily passionate? That's crazy. So that's an important thing, is examining the chart. How passionate are you? And then seeing if the other person has an equal passion. You do that from each person's spread. Okay? So you're not overlapping things, you're not finding connections between the spreads, which is part of the more actual compatibility. You're just saying, okay, I have a passionate person and a non-passionate person. We're going to have some problems here. Okay? And then in understanding that, you can explain the problems to the couple and help them understand. Because what I find when there's different degrees of passion, people oftentimes just can't understand how come someone can be so different in that regard. Okay? That's determined largely from Venus and Mars. Okay? Now, and there's different ways we determine these things. So we use different rules for looking at these different facets. Another really important thing is willfulness. People get into a partnership, hopefully, ideally, people are getting into a partnership because they want a partner. Okay? And these days, people tend to be looking for a partner. And sometimes they even call that partner. They don't say my squeeze, my wife, my husband, my lord, my lady. We call it our partner now, right? Now, unfortunately, there are people there that just want to squeeze, okay? Something like that. And there are some gents that just want a lady on their arm, okay? But most people are looking for a partnership, which means they want someone they can work together with in a productive, life-enriching way that includes as many good things as they can include in their lives. It includes love, companionship, vacations, sexual passion, finances, perhaps even business, hobbies, free time, you name it. We want it all from that person, right? So we want to have a partnership. And as many things as possible is what most people are looking for. In fact, most people are looking for such a good partnership that they don't need a partnership up with anybody else in the world. Like the rock climber I knew. His wife rock climbed with him. He was like, I got my rock climbing partner right here. He points to his wife. He was so happy. Okay, so he didn't need a buddy to go rock climbing with. He had his ace rock climbing wife. So that was really great for him. So these days we do try to get partnerships where we don't need anyone else, we can just live in this little solo universe with one other person, and we don't need a single other person in the world unless we need them to give us their money for something, okay? So a lot of people want that partnership, and that's not really a realistic partnership. No one's going to really get that because we're never going to find someone we can do everything with, right? But people want someone they can do as much with as possible these days. And so to do that successfully, they have to have a balanced willfulness. So that means you have to examine the will of one person and examine the will of another person. Are those two wills harmonious? That's one thing. But more importantly, you need to examine a person's chart and just examine their willfulness. And I use that term willfulness, which is we don't like that word, right? We say, oh, they're very willful. Well, that's kind of a nice way. I don't know if it's even a nice way. That's just another way for saying they're an egomaniac, right? They're egocentric. Everything has to be their way, right? So I use this as willfulness because that's the extreme negativity of it. That's important in compatibility. If people have extreme willfulness, then that means it's an affliction. It's a negative thing in regard to their ability to have a relationship with another person, whether that's their sibling, their brother, their friend, whatever. And you'll see people who have this extreme willfulness, they never manage to get along with anybody for a very long time. Because everything has to always be their way, the way they want it, when they want it, how they want it, without any care or regard for the other person's opinion. And obviously you can't have a relationship with a person like that. That's a narcissistic willfulness. So we have to examine a chart in light of that. Is this person's willfulness so extreme that there's just not room for another person? Okay? Those people, you just kind of got to write them off. They're just not partnership material. Okay? Now, other than that, we want to balance the willfulness. What if we get super narcissistic, willful people? Can they have a good relationship? Hell no. They'll never even have a relationship, right? Because they'll tear into each other and within 13 minutes hate each other and want to kill each other, never want to see each other. Okay? So you never have to worry about matching those people up. You know, they're going to know, they're going to recognize each other right away like two raptors and try to maybe bully each other real quick, but decide it's not going to benefit them. Usually you'll find that people with super willfulness are going to be finding and seeking people of lower willfulness that they can have everything the way they want. Okay? But ultimately the problem is willfulness needs to be balanced, because if willfulness isn't balanced, we start somehow losing respect for the other person. Okay? And by respect I mean that respect of this person is really a good partner for me. We lose that partnership respect because the willfulness is really important for creating a partnership where two people can work together to fight their way together as a team through life, to march through life together. If they have equal willfulness, then they respect each other. They both look at each other. They go, wow, you are awesome to each other. And they feel powerful as a team. Okay? Now, if the willfulness is different though, if one person is stronger-willed and the other one's weaker-willed, or if one person is healthily-willed and the other one has a suppressed will, not a narcissistic will, but a suppressed will, then they can't march together through life as true partners. At that point, the person who's got the stronger developed will is always going to be making things happen the way they want. The person with the weaker will is always going to be looking towards the person with the stronger will. The person with the weaker will can respect the person with the stronger will on one level, but they'll also tend to get frustrated with the fact that they never get to exert their will, okay, in light of the other person's stronger will. And then we have an imbalance, okay? So it's important to have this balanced willfulness, because without that, people can't march through life as true partners. They can do everything together, or they can do nothing together. It doesn't matter. To be true partners, where each person has a 50% vote on everything that happens, where they're really aligned, they have to have this equal willfulness. Okay? Otherwise, the willful one just inherently and naturally will always dominate the will of the weaker one. And that's just a part of human relationships. The minute you get into a room with someone, within a few minutes, you can tell who's got the dominant will. And that when something happens, one of the person's going to take charge. The person with the stronger will, right? It's just how it's going to naturally happen. In a room full of people, the person with the strongest will is going to take charge. Well, by partnership, it means we want to share our life and share our decisions and share what's going to happen with another person. But we only can truly do that with someone who has the same degree of willfulness. Okay? So this is an important part. Willfulness, whether it's extreme and narcissistic, is all determined from Mars and the Mars card. And to see the strength of will, and if it's balanced, if it's weak, if it's extreme, if it's whatever. Okay? And it's a very vast topic, because you can imagine all the different planetary combinations you could get falling in a person's Mars card. Or it might be a good Mars card, it might be a bad Mars card, it might be a Diamonds Mars card, a Clubs Mars card, whatever. A lot of variations can happen to determine the degree of the person's will. What I've noticed from doing card readings is that the Mars card seems to be the most important card when it comes to determining how good of a life a person can forge for themselves. It's the people with the troubled Mars cards are the ones I most often see coming in for readings needing help. There's something wrong with their will. They can't do what they will. They can't bring their will into active motion in a way that fructifies something in their life. So as a result, they come for readings to figure out what the hell's going wrong. Well, 90% of the time, you just look at that Mars card and say what's wrong is that you don't know how to make things happen in your life. Okay? So willfulness is a huge and very, very important subject. We'll actually spend quite a bit of time on that. And then there's, what are they expecting? We have expectations for fulfillment in a relationship, in a partnership. Oh, let me step back to willfulness again. Now, some people want a weaker partner. You know, some people just want someone that won't give them an opinion, that isn't really a partner, that's more like a pet or a chattel, or someone they can just take and do what they want. So you will sometimes find those. There is actually a lot of those people on Earth, but not that many of them, fortunately, come to readers. Although some do. And some readers actually want just a pet and really don't want a real partnership. So the people who actually don't want a real partnership, but just want someone who does everything they want, just wants a servant, a sex slave, whatever you want to call it, just someone who has no choice in what happens. Kind of like in, women shouldn't talk, they should just look good type chauvinistic thing. But women can want to be that man. Women sometimes just want a pet man too, These things happen. At that point, if that's what they want, then they need to find someone who has much less willfulness than they do. Otherwise, they're going to be fighting with that servant all the time, right? That's no good. Okay, so be aware of that. But you won't encounter many people like that. People who come to readers are more sensitive. They want more parts of themselves fulfilled. And as a result, they want a partnership where it's an equal mutual partnership. Okay? But if you live in Missouri, or something like that, you might have to find a lot of women out there with lower willfulness than the men. Okay, that's not a joke, semi-joke. They live in some backwards places, okay? All right. Last thing, what are they expecting? People want fulfillment in a relationship. So anyone who wants a relationship is expecting fulfillment. And that fulfillment is Venus and the Venus card. So we determine what they're expecting from Venus and the Venus card. And we're all expecting the same thing. The love, Venus, that's fulfilling. The fulfillment of love, which is Venus. The fulfillment of having something we love. That sounds so simple, and by itself it is. But what makes it very complex is that everyone expects that fulfillment in love to work in different ways. Some are healthy expectations, and some are unhealthy expectations. A healthy expectation is, I expect my love partner to fulfill the parts of me that a love partner can actually fulfill. Okay, that's a healthy expectation. The unhealthy expectations are, I want a love partner who can fulfill things that God never designed love partners to fulfill. But yet I still expect them to fulfill that, which means I've set myself up for disappointment even with the perfect partner. Okay, so you can see that's like really important, isn't it? Okay, Tom Cruise fails in that. Okay, he's like a famous example of someone who fails in that, whose expectations for what he's expecting to be fulfilled from a partner are such that he can never be happy with the woman he's with. Okay, so you don't want that. You don't want unrealistic expectations. Unrealistic expectations mean also that you expect a relationship to be fulfilling and give you what you need, even though you're not being the type of person that will allow allow a relationship to work. Okay, so basically you want to be, or the person who's got, what are they expecting? Venus afflicted in certain ways, is expecting a relationship to give them something and work for them, even though they're behaving in a way that promises the relationship will fail. Okay? If you want a relationship to work, you have to behave in a way that makes relationships work, right? You have to play the relationship game the way they work. A lot of people, and I mean a lot, like more than easily 50% of the population, plays the relationship game in a way that there's no way in hell they're going to have a relationship that works. It just can't happen, because even though they expect it to happen, they want that fulfillment, they do the very things that guarantee that the relationship will fail. Okay? So I can imagine those people are going to have a hard time having a good relationship with anyone, no matter the connections, no matter the compatibility. Okay? So all this pre-compatibility, you can see, is really the heart of seeing a person's ability to have a good relationship with this person or this person or this person. And only after you really examine these do we need to look into the connections. Otherwise, the connections, if there's a lot of good connections, if the person hasn't worked out any weaknesses here, are really just connections that they can't take advantage of. Okay? Now, an interesting thing you'll see as you work with people is you'll see people that come in that have this stuff really good. Okay? Those people at a young age will tend to meet people that they have some really good connections with. And if you see a person come in who's 18 and you look at all their pre-compatibility and it's all good, and they say, will you check my compatibility with my boyfriend? You can say, actually it's good, without even looking. Probably. Don't say that. Look, because you might have missed something. But you'll find if this is good, early on they'll attract the people they've got good connections with. Okay? Now, if this is bad, if their pre-compatibility is troubled, you're going to find in the early part of their lives, the people they, have in their lives, they've got no good connections, and even possibly some really difficult connections. So the person they are attracting are reflecting their pre-compatibility. Basically, the people they attract and the connections they have with those people will reflect their pre-compatibility, their capacity to have a good relationship. Okay? Because whatever your capacity is, that's what you're going to attract. Sometimes as people get a little older, and sometimes surprisingly it's not even that old. I've seen a few people do this in their early 20s. You'll see some serious hits to their pre-compatibility. But they'll be with someone that they've got a good compatibility. That means they're working on their pre-compatibility issues and making progress with them, and that person is someone they can continue to make progress with and have the best possible relationship with. They'll constantly have to work on their pre-compatibility weaknesses, but if a person's with a person that they've got good compatibility connections, at least they have a person that they can work and continue to improve those. And they wouldn't even have met that person if they weren't going in that positive direction. Okay? So you're going to see a lot of interesting relationships between the pre-compatibility and the compatibility. They will reflect each other. Okay? Alright, so as you can see, we're going to learn a lot of things. We're going to learn a lot of things about people, relationships, psychology, and a lot about the cards as well. Okay, so we'll start that with the first class will be on masculine and feminine energies, which will be the next video. Thank you.